Hey there. So, I've entitled this video, which I'm going to try to make come out a little bit better by centering that thing. I've entitled this video, Let's Develop a Nuclear Mindset. I know it sounds kind of grim, but hey, that's kind of where things are going these days. Things are getting real grim the world over. I mean, if you're paying attention to geopolitics, especially what's happening over there in Ukraine, uh, then you would kind of know that things are getting really grim. Uh, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to try to do it very quickly because I am notorious for making long videos. Uh, so let me go straight to my notes here and try to stick to them. So, first of all, you know, question has been asked a good many times uh, during my lifetime. What is this world coming to? Every time that some other terrible event takes place, whether it's a new war or a teenage son killing his mother or a mass shooting, what is this world coming to? A lot of times you just don't know how to answer that. I mean, it's just you see things getting worse, but you don't know how to categorize the things that are happening and what is making them worse. But anyway, so even Jesus asked a similar question. He said, how shall I define or how shall I describe this wicked and perverse generation? Well, my first answer would have been wicked and perverse. But you just said it, Jesus. You answered your own question. But anyway, I've thought, how would I explain, first of all, things that have happened in the world already, and then what's happening now and what I think is going to happen in the future, and how will I just kind of draw that line from one event to the other, so as to be able to say, okay, well, people, this seems to be where things are going. And it's kind of a hard thing to do. So what I did was I said, okay, well, let me borrow from sociology here, and they'll tell you, and sociologists will tell you, that at one time people were hunters and gatherers, and anthropologists, they're very similar actually, sociologists and anthropologists. I'm not going to describe the difference right here, right now, but you got hunters and gatherers, or you had hunters and gatherers. Then you had horticultural slash pastoral societies, and then you had agricultural societies, and then you had industrial societies. Now we're considered to be post-industrial slash information age, and so yeah, there are phases that humanity goes through, and if you sit back and you watch long enough, then you can eventually come up with some way of categorizing the types of things that society is doing right now on a large scale. The types of things that people all over in different countries are doing. But anyway, yeah. So now we're living in the information age, and the microchip is like the primary symbol of the information age, and all technology these days runs on microchips. As a matter of fact, Taiwan, although it's a very small nation, creates about 60% of the world's microchips. And anytime that they have a problem with China, then the microchips not being manufactured or shipped so quickly, and then all technology, the world over that depends on these microchips, the production slows down, such has been the case with automobiles in this country. But anyway, so here we are in the post-industrial / information age. And I ran across something online that said that maybe the next phase will be biotech. Now, it didn't quite define what they meant by biotech. I mean, I used to work at a hospital, and so I know a thing or two about biotech. But how it would define an entire society, that's a little beyond me. Okay, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, as I looked at that, I said, that kind of reminds me of what I think is next in society, what I think is next in the world, which is biorec. So I don't think we're going to do biotech next. I think we're going to do biorec. You see, and I've defined biorec as the combination of the development and hoarding by governments of the most destructive weaponry. I'll say that again. I have defined biorec as the combination of the development and hoarding by governments of the most destructive weaponry. And of course, we know that the most destructive weapons in the world are nuclear weapons. And I don't think any country has ever been quote unquote nuked with actual nuclear weapons. I'm not 100% sure how different nuclear weapons are from atomic weapons. I do know that the U.S. bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which did a lot to bring World War II to a close. But I'm getting ahead in my notes. That's kind of later on. But the U.S. did develop atomic / nuclear technology. And of course, Russia stole our secrets. And now Russia actually has more nukes than we do. Last I knew, Russia had over 6,000 nukes. We had just under 6,000, 5,500 in the U.S. And so between our two countries, we have about 12,000 nukes, and in the entire world, there are about 14,000 or so nuclear weapons. So the other 2,000 are split between at least 6 different countries. And I don't think any other country besides the U.S. and Russia has even a full 500 nukes. I believe that Ukraine actually had 585 nukes before, when the USSR was dismantled. Ukraine had 585 nukes, and as part of the dismantling of the USSR, Ukraine gave up its nukes. And now we see where Ukraine has been invaded, and so maybe the lesson there is that Ukraine should never have given up its nukes. And if they had not given up their nukes, if they had not given it back to Russia, then the U.S. and Russia would have about the same number of nukes, and Ukraine would be the third most nuclearized nation in the world. Okay, but they gave it up, and now they need our help. So let me see. There's that. Well, so, and those were actually notes that I just added later on. I'm actually now getting to my what was my first page of notes before I decided to add something else. But anyway, so let's develop a nuclear mindset. Well, so the Putin administration keeps flirting with the idea of nuclear war. And so we know that since Putin invaded Ukraine, that there have been incidents at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, which is defunct, but I guess there are things you have to do even after you shut down a nuclear power plant so as to maintain it and keep the nuclear material from spreading. You have to keep it cooled down and so forth. But I'm no nuclear physicist, so I don't even pretend to know how that stuff works. Okay, I just know from the news that there was an incident at the Chernobyl plant. I did hear about the explosion when it happened decades ago, so I know it's old news, and I know now that the facility is still being maintained. So obviously, you have to maintain these facilities for decades, even after you shut them down. And I do know that there was an incident at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which is actually still functional, also in Ukraine. And both incidents had to do with Putin's military taking over the facilities and threatening the facilities, and so it would seem to me that Putin wants people to be afraid that he will go nuclear, even though those incidents that were at nuclear power plants and they weren't nuclear missiles. But then there was also the news piece about how Putin had put his nuclear forces on high alert. And that, of course, made people wonder, well, is he going to fire nuclear missiles? And so there was that. And since then, there have been various moments where people in the Putin administration have spoken to the media and said, hey, look, we have the power to nuke Europe into oblivion. That's been said more than once by more than one Putin administration official. And I did read one such statement today, June 13th of 2022. And so Putin keeps flirting with this idea of nuclear war, and I think that he's very serious. And I think that he will hit the button. Some people say, well, he'd get nuked off the face of the earth too. But, we have homicidal, suicidal people in the populace. And, they'll go and they'll kill 5, 10, 20 people and then turn the gun on themselves. And so, what's to say that a politician can't go that route? And besides, we've already had an unhinged POTUS in the person of Donald Trump, and then people have wondered if Putin was becoming unhinged during this whole invasion of Ukraine. Okay, so if you've wondered whether or not he's becoming unhinged, then why would you figure that he would not be homicidal, suicidal, but on an international level? I mean, come on now. You're contradicting yourself if you think he, on the one hand, is becoming unhinged, but on the other hand, you don't think he would do something that would lead to his own demise. Okay? I mean, he wouldn't be the first to say, look, we're all going to die here today. And so I can see it. But anyway, let me get back to my notes here. So, also in today's news, June 13th, 2022, Taiwan warned China that, hey, China, if you decide to attack us, we have missiles that can reach Beijing. Okay, not just reach China, but reach Beijing. Okay, the capital. And I forget exactly what those missiles were called. I think it's some new model of missile, and I didn't memorize the name, but anyway. So Taiwan has let China know that, hey, China, we can attack Beijing, so back off, But there's all this nuclear saber rattling going on, okay? So Putin's doing his nuclear saber rattling, and then between China and Taiwan, there's some saber rattling going on, and I don't know. I don't think Taiwan is actually nuclear, but they are threatening a nuclear power, letting that nuclear power know we can attack your capital. Okay, so there is a little bit of nuclear saber rattling rolled into that. Okay, but let me see. So there's that, and then let me see. the U.S. and Russia, between the two of us, like I said earlier, we have over 80% of the world's nuclear weapons. And also in the article about Taiwan today, some officials quoted as having said, that basically that there's no point in having these awesome weapons, these very powerful weapons, if you don't have the willingness to use them. And I'm not sure if he was saying that he thinks that's how China is thinking, and that he's afraid that China might decide, well, heck, there's no point in having nukes if we're not going to use them, so let's attack Taiwan. Or if he's letting China know that, hey, we have these weapons, and the way we see it is there's no point in having these weapons if we're not going to use them. But either way you go, it adds up to war. And so Taiwan is doing its own brand of saber rattling. And so, let me see. I already mentioned that atomic bombs did a lot to end World War II, that the U.S. bombed Hiroshima on August 6th of 1945 and Nagasaki on August 9th of 1945. Upwards of 200,000 Japanese people died between those two explosions. And on September 1st or take that back, on September 2nd of 1945, exactly 6 years and 1 day after the war began, it ended. Okay, and so coming in with these very highly destructive weapons, it causes people to back up. Like, okay, I didn't see this one coming. I didn't see something this fierce, something this terrible. I'm not sure I want to go up against that kind of power. Let me surrender, and that's kind of what it came down to. And so it stands to reason that if a World War III were to begin, and I think it will begin very soon, probably by the end of August of this year, I expect that Vladimir Putin will fire nukes into non-NATO countries. And so last year we had a major attack while the U.S. was preparing to pull out of Afghanistan, and that major attack occurred on August 26th, which is my mother's birthday. She's still living. She's 84. And who knows, we may have another major attack, a nuclear attack by Putin on her birthday this year, August 26th. But anyway, I'm suspecting that by the end of August, Putin will have fired some nukes. And he'll probably fire them at non-NATO countries, because then he won't have to fight the 30 NATO countries, or the 31st country trying to become a NATO country, which is Ukraine, or the 32nd or 33rd countries, which are Finland and Sweden. So they haven't become NATO countries either, but they are trying to become NATO countries. Okay, and so anyway, I think Putin is pretty smart, and he is going to make sure that he only nukes countries that are not NATO allies, and then that's going to give the world pause, because they're going to be like, okay, so he went there. He used nuclear weapons. Okay. He's not soft. He's going real hard. Okay. And I'm not sure if that's going to be the red line that where NATO countries say, hey, look, we can't sit by idly while he does this. Even though he didn't attack NATO countries, we're still going to attack him just because he crossed the red line by using these weapons. Okay, but let's not forget, the U.S. developed atomic/nuclear technology, and Russia stole that technology and got ahead of us. Okay, and And let's not forget that the U.S. put 250 nuclear bombs in 5 different European countries in the late 50s. I believe 1959. And one of those countries was Turkey. They have an air base called the Incirlik Air Base. And the U.S. has 50 B-61 atomic, or not atomic, but nuclear bombs in that Turkish air base. And then they have another 200 nuclear bombs in 4 other European countries. And the reason that the U.S. back in the late 50s put these 250 nuclear bombs in these 5 European nations was, twofold. Twofold reasoning. So one was to show NATO that the U.S. is not soft and that we will go there if we need to go there, that we will use nuclear weapons if we need to use them. Okay, so they wanted to show that they weren't soft and to give NATO countries, other NATO countries, the assurance that we, the U.S., will bomb the shit out of Russia if we feel like we need to, and so. But the other reason was to intimidate the USSR/Russia. Okay, so the U.S. is real big on intimidation. Okay, but it could come back to bite them. And the U.S. has used gunboat diplomacy, where they say, okay, we're going to talk diplomatically, but we're going to have our gunboats out there waiting. So if the talks don't work out, then as soon as I, the president, or I, the Secretary of State, leave, the order can be given for them to start firing. Okay. So you hold the threat over someone's head, basically, while you talk to them, quote unquote, diplomatically. Okay. And so, anyway, the U.S. has liked to use these threats against other nations, but then there's the Cuban Missile Crisis, where in the early 1960s, after the U.S. put the B-61 nuclear bombs in Europe, then Kennedy, who actually took office in 61, he decided that he didn't want Cuba, which is only 90 miles away from the U.S., to be able to have missiles from Russia. Okay? So our country wanted to threaten Russia with these B-61 nuclear bombs, but they didn't want Russia to threaten us by putting Russian missiles in Cuba, which is 90 miles away from the U.S. border. I shouldn't say border, but I should say 90 miles away from Miami, the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula. And so now, Putin's pushing back and saying, look, now Russia and Ukraine actually share a border. They're not 90 miles away. We share a border. And we don't want the U.S. or any other NATO country giving missiles to Ukraine to attack Russia. Okay, in much the same way that the U.S. didn't want Russia giving missiles to Cuba, enabling Cuba to attack the U.S. Okay, so same principle here, but the U.S. wants to play stupid, and Joe Biden wants to keep saying that Russia's attack was unprovoked, but it was not unprovoked. You're talking about Ukraine possibly joining NATO, and part of joining NATO is having NATO weaponry, okay, and Ukraine shares a border with Russia. So, and so long story short, it would enable Ukraine and the broader NATO alliance to attack Russia more easily. And so Russia's saying, hey, look, we can't be having this here. And let's do a little bit of NATO history here. So World War II ended in 1945. NATO was created in 1949. At that time, Joseph Stalin was still alive. He died in 1953. He was the communist leader of the USSR when NATO was created. And since him, there have been 6 other USSR leaders and 3 Russian presidents. And so Putin's basically saying, hey, look, NATO, you had 12 countries back in 1949 when you at your inception. You now have 30 countries. So throughout the courses of these other 9 presidencies, communist leaderships, you've gone and gotten 18 more friends. Okay, now the average black person can tell you, in street smarts, you don't let somebody leave and go get their friend to come back and fight you. As soon as they say that they're going to leave and come back, you take it to their ass right then and there. You beat their ass before they leave, so that they can't go get a weapon and they can't go get a friend.